So when you're on an endless journey like this, you know, what you really have to do is carefully pick what you're going to work on. Plan those things out, justify them, cost justify them, re-justify them. And as you do those programs in information governance, then you have to monitor them and be accountable for how you did and where you're going next. It's pretty straightforward in the physical travel world. When you're on such a journey, you need a map because a map is going to tell you what the landscape looks like. Very straightforward concept. And it's also going to tell you where you are on the map. The better your map is, the more precise your map is, the easier it's going to be to figure out where you want to go, why you want to go there, how you're going to get there, how you're going to measure your progress. Very, very straightforward concepts. When you're doing information governance programs, I mean, you're not, you know, a hobbit, you know, trying to get across the Middle Earth. I mean, you're trying to improve your information governance. So the map doesn't look like a map on the wall like this, right? It looks like baselines and benchmarks and strategic and tactical objectives of your organization. These are the things, the bench lines, or your map and where you're going, your objectives. So, you know, having this discussion in this way, it seems very, very straightforward. I'm on a journey. I need a map. An IG review is a kind of tool that can provide a map for information governance programs. So it raises the big question, why do so few people do these reviews? Everybody has an information governance program online. Well, traditionally, these programs have been done with internal research and production. So people in-house decide they're going to do a review on the processes. And that has a lot of time and resources and expertise involved because the in-house team is doing the journey work. It's not building the map. And another thing that's missing with in-house efforts is the perspective from the day-to-day, is the ability to pull out of your ongoing programs and get that high-level perspective. So people do these in-house, but they are hard to do and they're not a regular activity. The second traditional way these things are done are with consultants, which, you know, solves the time and expertise problem and perspective problem. But bringing in consultants has another set of constraints in that they usually come in, they demand a lot of the resources of an organization, and it's a budgeted activity. And so they're not done as often as possible, although there is an industry around that. We're going to show you examples here about IG reviews and the kinds of things you want to do in them. The examples we're going to show you just happen to be from the tools that Sherpa and ARMA International have built to do IG reviews. It turns out that the Sherpa and ARMA has the same kind of feeling about these reviews and that they should be done more often and they should be easier to do. And so we've teamed up to create not the most exhaustive IG review you've ever seen, but a pretty darn good one that standardizes some of the main concerns that you want to cover in an IG review and automates them. And it turns out that when you do that, and use technology to standardize and automate the key parts of an IG review, we're able to offer it as a free system together so that organizations can just start getting the map going. So examples we're going to walk you through now just happen to be from our systems because those are the tools we've built. but the concepts or the universal concepts of the core things you want to hit on in reviews. At this point, then, I will hand off here to Jeff, who's going to talk about the main parts of assessing the data itself in your organization. And I'll do that now. Jeff, it's your turn.
Thanks, Scott, and thank all of you once again for cutting out an hour of your day. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you regarding data assessment. So with that said, no further ado, let's move on. And we're going to talk about the three different topics here. Data inventory rot, which stands for redundant, outdated, and trivial data. And then lastly, intellectual property and risk. So I'm going to spend some time on each one of these, probably 15 to 20 minutes here speaking with you regarding these topics. So let's get started with data inventory. Okay, so the first thing we need to figure out with data inventory is, where is your data? Obviously, that sounds like a pretty easy question to answer. However, you got to give it some thought. Obviously, they're going to be on some user computers, desktops, laptops, USBs, CDs, DVDs, external drives, all the different types of devices that are easily mobile, that can be moved from one place to another. Other places, obviously, are file shares, which is some static locations of those devices. And then lastly, the enterprise data sources, things such as SharePoint and connections, some data that is always centralized in a specific location. So what we're trying to figure out here is, what types of data exist? Where does it exist? How distributed is that data? And how many different data types do you have in your organization? So we got 5 basic questions here regarding the data. First off is the type. So what types of data do you have? As you would expect, you would have email would be one of the types. Everybody has email. So there is definitely inventory of email to be done. There are files, obviously, sitting on file shares, users, computers, what have you. And then lastly, once again, going into the social media solutions such as SharePoint and connections, you could have information in things such as wikis and blogs and what have you. So location-wise, once again, we already sort of expanded upon this. User hard drives, USBs, what have you, file shares, all that data could be there. That once again, the defined data of SharePoint and connections, and also on your mail servers. So those are the different spots that can be containing the data. Moving on to the owners. Owners typically are the people who, as it would suggest, owns the data. And that being said, people that are obviously the email, it'd be whose mailbox it is. And then for the owners of files, obviously it would be who created or modified them. The same goes with anything in SharePoint and connections. Age, talking about when the email was sent. And then with files, when they were created, modified. So once again, this is all pretty good foundation of things here. And then lastly, the amounts. So the total number of file types, the counts, the sizes, all that particular kind of information. So let's jump in here. So as Scott alluded to, then we will be showing you some things from our data inventory product called Altitude IG. And I'm just going to show you some basic things within this product to help you understand what we offer in this. So this first screen you're seeing right now is what we call the data inventory status. So you'll see in the red that we've targeted 5 owners and 4 devices. And in the green, you'll see that we're currently processing 65% of those. And I'll pretend, if you will, that we've actually gone through that and we have completed that whole data inventory. So now let's go see what we've collected. What information do we have? Or as Scott likes to say, what dark data can we illuminate within your organization? So these are the stock reports that come with Altitude. And I am definitely going to be showing you a lot of screenshots of some of these different reports here, actually quite a few of them. So these are the standard ones that come. As you can read those for yourself to what they offer, what they provide to you. But let's jump in and see what some of those actually look like, because this is going to be some very interesting data for you. So what we're looking at right now is the file size by type. So this is an automatic classification of data types. And you'll see here that each one's represented by a different color in the key in the upper right. And then you'll see their overall size that they are consuming right now and the different colors in the pie chart. So you'll see the percentages. So this is the percentages reflect the amount of size used by each of the types of files. In the bottom left, I want to draw your attention to the key that's there. What I've done here is I've actually clicked on the pie slice for application data, and it gives me a breakdown of the different types of files that are sitting out here within my environment. So some very handy information that you can use to understand exactly what types of files and sizes they have. And then going on further, we're going to go to the file count by type. So pretty much slicing and dicing that same data, but instead of doing it by size, we're doing it by count, and then also showing you once again the percentages based upon those categories. So we can see how prolific some of the types are. For instance, in the document files here, we see that there's 6,031 text files sitting out there, which is comprising a lot of the files for the document files types of data. So what you have to ask yourself is, do these file types have any consequences? What's within them? What do I have within these types of files? Where is that data stored? It could be anywhere, once again, on a user's desktop, on the file share. And ask yourself, what kind of data is generally in these types? Obviously, a Word document, we know what that extension is. PDF, the same thing. But as we know with users, no offense to them, but they can have a lot of different data types sitting on their laptops and file shares and desktops. So it's very interesting to collect all this and see these categories and how it breaks down of what data is within your environment. Now we talked about files, let's jump into emails by location. So this is actually going to show us where we find the emails. So in this one, it's very interesting because looking at this, you see that 60% of PST files. For those of you who don't know, PST files can be local. So what are the ramifications of a local file sitting on somebody's hard drive? Well, I can think of a few. First off, would be those files being backed up. If that hard drive crashes, then what happens to that data? Do you have a backup of it? The same thing goes for managing that data. So I just want to illuminate you to all the different things that can possibly be a concern for you of where you find this data and what the consequences are of where it's located and the risks of such use. Also, is there data leakage? And what I mean by that is, what is the risk of this data being on a laptop, the laptop being stolen? Or, once again, the hard drive crashing, or losing the USB drive, or whatever the case might be. What kind of information is on here? And we're going to talk about the proprietary information a little bit, but think about those things when you look at your data inventory, that you have data out there that could be very important and you don't want to be distributed outside your organization. So, the summary of data inventory, you want to find out where your data is, where it's contained, what it is. We want to know all that information. What types of data exist within that, all those different targets that you specified that you want to search. And then lastly, why not just buy more space? I mean, that's a typical answer for, hey, I've got all these files, I need more space. I view space like closets in your house. You know, I don't think anybody has a closet in their house. They just don't fill with things. So the more closets you have, the more stuff you put in them. So is that an information governance solution? Is this to buy more space? Probably not. You probably want to know what kind of data is out there within your organization so you can take the proper steps to do whatever you need to do with it. Okay, so with that, we're going to jump on to topic number 2, which is ROT data. Once again, ROT being an acronym for redundant, outdated, and trivial. So I'm going to speak to each one of these a little bit, give you some examples of some ROT data, and we'll talk about why ROT data is important in your organization. So first off, what's redundant data? Well, as its name would suggest, redundant data is data that is duplicated somewhere within your organization. So what kind of data can be duplicated? Well, email definitely can be duplicated. So for instance, I could have a message that's sitting on my mail server, but is also in a local, like a PST file, so I have the same message in 2 different locations. That's redundant. The same could be true, if you really want to look at it, is that if a user sends an email to 10 other people, they all have the same message. That's redundant data in essence. Redundant file, as you would suggest and imagine, is that you would be a file that's sitting out somewhere on somebody's hard drive or in a network, and their exact same name, size, and date timestamp on them. They're duplicate files, so those are redundant data. Outdated data, what is just as suggested, as redundant as that sounds, is that mail and files that have reached an age that is older than your assigned policy on those, that data is outdated. So what harm does it do for you? That's just something you decide. But that's what outdated data is data that has reached its limit of usefulness. Pardon me. And then lastly, trivial, which is things such as personal emails or pictures of your kids or things that would not be used in your organization for any reason that would be part of your proprietary information or what have you. And the same holds true for non-personal. It doesn't simply have to be something that a user has done. It could be something from your culture of your organization, sending out for your company picnic, what have you. Things that are not typically involved in the records management process would be your trivial data. So how can rot hurt you? Well, quite honestly, that's for you to decide. But be aware that most likely anywhere that data is stored, there's rot data there because people love to store things in different places. So how can rot data harm your organization? Once again, it could be legal, it could be financial, it could be functional, organizational. It's for you to decide where that data is harmful to you, but just be aware that most likely there's rot data somewhere in your organization. So what are the data sources? As I said a couple seconds ago here, you can have rot data pretty much anywhere where there's a place to store things. If a user finds a location to store a file, they'll probably leverage it in some manner, shape, or form. So this will allow you to be able to go through and try to get an understanding of where that rot data exists so that you can take the proper steps to do anything with it that you need to do. So here's another screenshot from my Altitude product, and what it's showing you is the duplicate sizes of files. Now, obviously, if two files have the same size, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're duplicates. However, that does refine that process to help you understand that there are possible duplicates sitting out there. Moving on to file size by age. So once again, this is going to show you the outdated portion of this. So this is a really useful pie chart. So you notice that we have the different retention amounts here, 1 to 3 years old, 3 to 6 years old, what have you. And I want to draw your attention to the dark green one here at 6 to 10 years old. So here you have 3% of your files are between 6 and 10 years old somewhere. So how can this data hurt you? Well, once again, it's up for you to decide if it's being affected by your policy or not, or if it should be. And that actually segues right into the same thing with email. So now we have emails by age. So as you see here, let's do a little example. Say that you had a policy that was to manage all emails that are older than 6 years old. Well, right now I'd say that policy is not working too well because about 48% of these messages are older than 6 years old. So what are the risks of that data being in your organization? How is that outdated data affecting you? Then moving on lastly to an example for trivial. Here's attachments by type. So you'll notice that once again the different categories and have you. I actually have done unknown. You're going to see XMind as one of the file types in the bottom left. XMind is typically from a mind map software. So maybe it's not something that is part of the policy enforcement records management within your company. So that may be considered trivial data within your organization. So what's the summary for rot? Well, where is your redundant, outdated, and trivial data? Where is it stored? What's the risk of having that data in your organization? Should you be concerned about it? I'd imagine that the answer to both of all those is yes, that everybody has rot data in one shape, way, or form. And should you be concerned? I would definitely be concerned because, once again, it could affect you legal, financial, functional, in many different ways. Good examples, for instance, from a redundant data, maybe you have two files that you thought were, both of them you thought were the final copy of inventory list or how to assemble something if you're a manufacturer, but one of them is actually inaccurate because it's been updated, and somebody starts distributing that file thinking that it's the recent one. I mean, there's a good example of redundant data or outdated data hurting you. So with that said, we're going to move on to the last topic, and this is called intellectual property and risk. So what is intellectual property? Well, once again, typically what I view that is the proprietary information, this first bullet here. Now, I'm not so much going to jump into the regulated Social Security card, credit card numbers, any of that. Let's focus just on, for today, just on the proprietary information. Why should you be concerned about that? Where is it stored? Where is it at risk anywhere in your environment? So with that, I'm going to jump over to a slide here that shows us 6 Word documents that's sitting on somebody's hard drive. You'll see in the file path, if that's visible to you there, that it's on a C drive of this hard drive. So now that begs the question, what do these files contain? And there's some examples down at the bottom that they could be pharmaceutical recipes, food recipes, manufacturing processes, something that your company has made and something that your company depends on for revenue. So here we have these files sitting out here. So once again, if you will imagine with me here that one of these files is proprietary. What's the consequences if this gets externalized? What happens to your company? How is it affected if this file suddenly is shared outside of your company? Is it protected? Is it encrypted? What's the risk of this file being externalized within your organization? Why is it sitting on somebody's hard drive if it's proprietary? So those kind of things are very important questions to ask once the data inventory has been done and you've seen the file sitting out there. What file should I be concerned about? So what types of data should you analyze? As we see here with an altitude, we do email and files. I would also include social on there as well, because what this is going to do, once again, is help you understand, and once again, to use Scott's expression, how to illuminate your dark data. You don't know what you don't know. So have a process to go out and be able to inventory your data so that you can have this visual to be able to see what data do I have, where is it located, what should I do about it, should I be concerned, should I move it, back it up, all those different types of questions within your organization. So in summary, for me, we talked about data inventory, so some things you need to be aware of. You need to determine where your data is stored, the distribution of your data out to those devices that can be carried easily by a human, the type of data that exists in your organization, and what's the usefulness and risk of all that data that you found. It's going to be a lot of work, but it's going to be a very valuable reward for you once you have finished that, to get an understanding and get your arms around the inventory of your data. Rock, what are some of the things with that? What percentage of your data is redundant? What's the risk of your redundant data? Once again, that's for you to decide. How much data is outdated within your organization? Why are the policies, if you have them and they're being enforced, why are they not managing that outdated data? What's the risk, once again, of your outdated data as well? And where does it exist? And then the amount of trivial data that you have, and you need to use this for the raw data to determine the possible litigation, financial, functional, organizational risk involved with this data existing in your company. And then lastly, intellectual property and risk. You need to determine where it exists, what type of data types comprising it, and what's the risk of losing or compromising this data. So with that said, I'm going to turn it back over to Scott, and thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you, Jeff. So you guys can see there's a lot of maps you can build with simple tools to really get an idea of where you want to plot your course. But it's more than that, because that's just looking at the data within your organization, the unstructured data. The second part of it is assessing your organization itself. And that's where Sherpas to make available their next level assessment. So I'm going to now turn over to David, and then he'll present on that part.
Thanks, Scott. We're going to switch screens here. You should be able to see our screen now. Wanted to go in and first of all talk about who ARMA is. And many of you may already be aware of ARMA, but we're a 59-year-old nonprofit organization with roughly 27,000 or more members over 30 different countries. Next year we celebrate our 60th anniversary, and we've been providing a variety of educational opportunities and educational publications covering the principles of records management. And we're pretty well noted or known worldwide for our standards and guidelines. Here about 7 years ago, or 2008 timeframe, ARMA International introduced the principles into, as we discussed, how to assess your organization. These principles are what we're using to assess that or to set as a baseline or standard. The generally accepted record-keeping principles are regarded as a way to protect organizations for CEOs, CFOs, and a variety of different companies. Legislators use the principles to help craft legislation, to help hold organizations accountable. And then, of course, records management professionals, use it to help design comprehensive and effective records management programs. What are the principles? Well, the principles start off with accountability, integrity, protection, compliance, availability, retention, disposition, and transparency. Basically, any principle covers a piece of information from its inception all the way through its life cycle. And really, to help with those principles, we designed a maturity model for information governance, which really helps paint a more complete picture and an effective information governance program. This maturity model is really based upon the 8 principles, as well as a foundation of standards, best practices, legal and regulatory requirements. And as the maturity model goes beyond just a mere statement of the principle, it starts out by beginning to define characteristics that various levels of record-keeping programs. For each principle, the maturity model associates various characteristics that are typical for each of our 5 levels. So there's from substandard all the way through transformational. So many questions come up. Either we find companies that are running an IG program or just getting started. Oops, something happened to my screen here. There we go. So what ARMA introduced in February of this year was a IG assessment that helps establish baselines and benchmarks to ensure accountability. It identifies your organization's information governance risk, helps understand what the severity of those risks are, and really helps you identify those gaps based upon the specific principle or by an overall score. This is what it looks like. It's all licensed by a user administrator. We have organizational information that we put into it, but there's basically 3 levels or 3 areas that are most common within the assessment here for your organization. We have our organizational profile, which we manage both business units and employees. But our assessments area, where we maintain our assessments, archive assessments from previous participants, and then where we can see results and reporting. Our business units, we can separate these out based upon where your stakeholders are within your organization, and then we have our stakeholders. If you're a company of several thousand employees, it offers unlimited users, but the nice thing is that you're probably not going to be using or assessing all employees. The assessment also comes with some email notifications, so there's an invite, and you can, once you create the assessment, you can create a start date and an end date, and then select your stakeholders, your participants within those different high-value targeted areas, and then assess them based upon a specific principle. You can do all 8, or you can be very selective. For example, if you just wanted to select information technology and select the principles of maybe protection and compliance, you have the capability of doing that as well. We also have our automated email that we use both some static and some dynamic information in there. This just invites the participant to the assessment. Then we can automate some reminders. If we find that the assessment hasn't been completed, we can generate some automatic reminders. And then we can also generate a thank you once the assessment has been completed. Once the assessment has been completed, any reminders are removed from the queue. So here's what the assessment looks like. It's a set of questions based upon a principle. And so in this example, we have a score slider that is used to slide up the scale here to pick a score. And our question is posted up here, and then we fit to that question the best answer, which delivers a score. The participant always knows where they are in the process. They will see that, okay, this is question 1 of 5. And then once they have answered these, they can then move on to the next. Another area that helps substantiate that score is adding our comments to this. So overall, there's roughly 60 questions in the assessment across all 8 principles, and based upon that participant's answer and comments will present you with a score. To help this be more of a self-assessment, we've added in some help menus. If the participant may not be familiar with our ARMA maturity model, there are links here that take them back to that. There's information here in the tool as to what the scoring means, and if they need additional information, again, there's a link that takes them to in-depth information about our maturity model. The participant also has 2 other choices besides just 1 through 5, and that would be they can select a 0, I don't know, or this doesn't apply to my organization, and that does show up in the scoring. We've also added, to help assist with this self-assessment, some links to the principles. These are video links that are available within the assessment to help them understand what each of the principles mean. These are mostly about 1.5 minutes, but all of them are less than 2 minutes. And then at the end of the assessment, the participant will see a summary of the question, what their maturity score was, and then what the process, any comment that they might have left during that process. That brings us then back to our administrative view of the assessment as we're looking at the results and how that affects how those scores are accumulated across our organization. So now we can start to dive in and look at some of the various reports. One of the most popular report that our customers find is this heat map, because based upon just at a glance, I can see where my low scores are. So for example, protection scored low in information technology, availability scored low in the marketing department, and so did retention, and so did disposition. So like I said, at a glance that we can see where our organization scored low. And the goal is to be at least in our maturity model a 3 or above. But we come back with some strategies to maybe help raise your level and advance yourself up to, if you're sitting at a 2, maybe some strategies to help you advance to the next level. There's some relevant resources from our bookstores, and there's also some online courses that ARMA provides to help you with that. And we've designed this for each of the 8 different principles. Another report that's good for an admin is just to look at either one of our bar charts for a score selected. This lets us know that we had the majority of our participants selected a score, and few of them selected, I don't know, or this does not apply. If these numbers were high, then maybe we selected the wrong stakeholders, or we might have a training issue. We show that same information in a pie chart as well. We can also extract what we call the low scores. So, for example, from a report, I can really focus in on all of those areas or business units that had a score of less than 3. So for my organization, maybe there's a policy and procedure in place for decommissioning hardware, but here in our information technology area, this person scored one incredibly low, especially for decommissioning hardware and software. So what does that 1.5 mean? It means basically there is no process for removing data and decommissioning hardware. From here, I can take this and I can build averages of those low scores by department or by each one of the principles, and this happened to be in the principle of disposition. We also offer an executive summary. This executive summary just is a real simple document that comes with a cover page. There's an overview of like when this assessment was completed, how many participants were involved in it, and what departments were assessed. There's a variety of more information, but I was told I was only going to get about 30 minutes of your time, but I wanted to wrap it up here. That kind of gives you a basic overview of our ARMA assessment and why I feel like, combined with what Sherpa has to offer with the data assessment, this gives you the best of both worlds. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Scott.
Thanks, David. Bring back the slide. Thank you for that good overview of assessing the organization, the second major part of a core ID review. So we've shown you guys a lot of things you can get doing a quick ID review in your organization today. What should you do now? I mean, this is our recommendation that it is important to have a good map. And you should update it because this is a planning tool. This is not a doing tool. This is a planning tool to give you an understanding of what's going on with the data in all your systems. So regardless of how you do it, that we recommend is your next step or your first step, depending on where your organization is. Get started on some concept of ID reviews. There are, as I said before, a few ways to do that. Your people in-house can do internal research and production and start looking at your capabilities and your data. You can bring in outside consultants. You can use free automated tools like what Sherpa and ARMA have teamed up on. Any of these things, provide that role of getting you started and giving you an update on where your organization is. We're going to do a bunch of questions have come in. So at this point, we're just going to run through a handful of them, and then we'll wrap it up. If you're not interested in the questions, we thank you for your time on the webinar, and we'll get into the first question now. This comes in, and I think this is probably a good one for Jeff. Let me read it, and then Jeff says, with ROT data, when you have two final files, and final is in quotation marks, is it a bad thing to evaluate the files based on the modified data?
Thanks, Scott. That's a good question. So my answer to that would be, yes, that is a bad way of doing it, because quite honestly, as much as I like to automate things, I think that human intervention is going to be necessary in this scenario. So if you have two files and you're not quite sure which one is the winner, if you will, then I would think that somebody's going to have to review those instead of automatically deciding by which one was modified last. So that would be my recommendations on this particular question. Thanks for that. Scott?
Sure. The next one is, well, this is a good one. This is, why isn't vendor-hosted data included? Isn't that a corporate asset also? Yes, it really is. That's a core and growing form of information, whether it's in something like Dropbox or OneDrive or in a hosted Office 365 situation. And the Sherpa tools reach out and inventory that information as well. That's a great question. Sorry that we oversighted on the slide. I'm going to take this other one too. Someone said, well, why are you guys offering such an IG review for free? Well, the answer is that they're important and they're useful, and they're easy to do based on the technology that we build as a software provider and what ARMA has built as the industry standard professional organization. And so we thought we wanted to get it out there and let people get the value of seeing these reports and assessments about their organization and their data, and going forth and helping them plan. Because it's really, once you put things in software and automate them, it's easy to do. There's not a lot of trips or costs involved to let people partake in that kind of data of their organization. And then the last one I'll wrap up with is someone asked, is a presentation available, the slides? Yeah, absolutely. We'll send an email out to everybody who participated here, and if you're interested in different follow-ups or the slides, just email back, and we'll get that stuff to you. So with that, thank you very much for your time. Oh, wait, there's one more question came in for wrapping up. Is there a cost for the ARMA product? Somebody just asked. There was a cost, but Sherpa has borne that cost for the industry. So the Sherpa is licensed and partnered with ARMA to make a one-time version of the assessment free. It's part of the IG reviews that we offer. So it's a free program. Now, the ARMA assessments can be used long-term within an organization. And if you get a lot of value out of a one-time review, then certainly you can work with ARMA to license long-term use. So that's, I think that's 4 or 5 questions. That's good. So again, thank you everybody for tuning in, and I hope you found this useful.